The story of a high school student who walked into school one January morning and had no idea that a classmate had spent 4 months planning to make sure he never walked out.
He was a teenager at Lake Brantley High School in Altamonte Springs, Florida. An ordinary student with an ordinary schedule. He had a lunch period, a group of people he moved through the day with, classes that probably felt long and hallways that probably felt familiar. He was unremarkable in the way most teenagers are, present but invisible in the crowd. That invisibility is what made him a target. Because to one of his classmates, he didn't look like himself. He looked like someone else entirely. And to her, that resemblance had quietly become an obsession. Isabelle Valdez was 15 years old, quiet by most accounts, careful with what she showed people. She had a best friend, Lois Lippert, 14, and the two of them moved through school the way close friends do. Same hallways, same jokes, same easy shorthand that builds between people who spend most of their time together.
What no one around them understood was that since September of 2025, they had been sharing something else entirely. Something that had been taking shape for months, in notebooks, in photographs, in quiet conversations that no one else was invited into.
Isabelle had developed a fixation, deep, consuming, and increasingly organized. It centered on Adam Lanza, the person responsible for the 2012 Sandy Hook elementary tragedy. Somewhere along the way, that fixation had crossed into something that investigators would later describe as a genuine belief system. Isabelle believed that if she carried out what she described as a ritual sacrifice, harming a classmate who physically reminded her of Lanza, she could form a spiritual bond with him and bring him back from the dead. She had written in her own hand that she and Lanza were soulmates, that this act would reunite them, that it was, in her words, a fair and beautiful sense of devotion. That is not a metaphor. That is what investigators found inside a notebook she carried to school every day. She had identified her target months earlier, a male classmate. She began watching him, photographing him without his knowledge, filming him as he moved through the school, quietly, consistently, over months. At some point, she brought Lois into it, and Lois didn't walk away. Lois listened, Lois agreed, and Lois began to draw. The two of them moved through the fall semester of 2025, carrying a plan that was becoming more detailed with every passing week. They had discussed a location, a school restroom, where they could have a moment without witnesses. They had discussed tools, a knife, gloves, something to subdue him.
They had thought about the aftermath. And through all of it, Isabelle kept writing. She kept the notebook. She kept the photographs. She left, in other words, a record.
On the night of January 22nd, 2026, Isabelle made a decision she likely thought was harmless. She told someone about the plan, a person she trusted. She told them they were going to act the following morning. She wanted them to know. That person sent an anonymous tip through FortifyFL, a school safety app, that same night. The message described a student going by the name Jimmy, an alias, and named the intended target. School officials were alerted. Law enforcement was notified. And by the following morning, deputies were already inside Lake Brantley High School before the first bell. But something about the timing matters more than you might think. Investigators said they reached the girls approximately 20 minutes before they intended to carry out the plan. Not hours, not a day, 20 minutes. Whatever window existed between a foiled attempt and something far worse was measured in less than half an hour.
When deputies searched Isabelle's backpack, they found what the tip had described, a knife. Gloves, Clorox wipes, a towel. The plan, as investigators had come to understand it, involved luring the student into a restroom and harming him there. What was in that bag was consistent with that plan in every detail. Not improvised, not panicked. Methodical, prepared over time. Inside the same bag, inside the notebook, was the letter.
Isabelle had been writing it to her parents on the morning of her arrest. "Dear Mama and Papa," it began. "I'm sorry for what I'm going to do. Hopefully you will find this paper. I want you guys to know that none of it is your fault, or anyone else's for that matter. I chose to do this by myself, for myself." She wrote that she had known something was wrong with her since she was very young, that she had always hidden it, that she had never truly been comfortable around other people, that being forced to interact felt like a kind of suffering she had learned to disguise. She wrote that her parents had been perfect. She apologized for not being a better child. The letter was unfinished. A deputy had taken the notebook before she could complete it. What they found attributed to Lois added another layer entirely. Investigators said she had drawn multiple sketches depicting the intended victim. One showed him on the floor. Another showed him hanging. Several were described by investigators as sexually explicit. These were not idle drawings made in a moment of dark humor. They had been requested by Isabelle, and Lois had made them. Both girls were placed in a patrol vehicle following their arrest. The camera inside the vehicle recorded everything. And when prosecutors played that footage at the bond hearing weeks later, what the courtroom heard reframed the entire case. The girls were laughing, not nervous laughter, not the kind that comes from shock or disbelief. They were relaxed. They were comfortable. They complained openly about the person who had reported them. They discussed the knife, how they had sharpened and tested it beforehand.
They talked about their upcoming booking photographs with the kind of casual interest you might bring to picking an outfit. I was gonna do my makeup this morning for the mugshot, but I couldn't find anything. This is such a bonding experience. I love this. And then Isabelle said, plainly, without hesitation.
She added that she had expected to be sent to a psychiatric facility after the arrest, that the possibility had excited her. The prosecutor who played the footage in court called it a sociopathic attitude exhibited by both young ladies. The judge agreed, and that footage became the foundation of the state's argument for keeping both girls in custody without bond. Lois's parents took the stand. They asked for their daughter to come home. They said they could watch her, monitor her, keep her away from harm. The judge said no. The recording had argued the case more effectively than any testimony could. The video showed two people who were not frightened by what had almost happened, who were, if anything, disappointed that it hadn't. Both girls were formally booked into Seminole County Jail on February 3rd, 2026. Each faces 6 charges, including attempted first-degree premeditated murder, attempted felony murder, and possession of a weapon on school property, among others. Both have entered not guilty pleas. They are being tried as adults, a decision the state attorney's office said was made to give the justice system more options to manage them long-term. Their next scheduled court appearance is April 29th, 2026. The case is ongoing. The unnamed student, the one who had been watched, photographed, and filmed without his knowledge since September, went home that afternoon. What that day looked like for him, what the weeks after looked like, is not something the public record captures. But he had been the center of someone else's obsession for 4 months without knowing it. That is its own kind of thing to carry.
What stays with you, sitting with this case, is not the plan itself. Plans fall apart for all kinds of reasons. What stays with you is the architecture of it, the months of quiet, methodical preparation. The notebook that became its own evidence file. The letter written to her parents on the morning she expected to act fans, tucked into the same bag as the tools she had brought to school. And then the footage, made by law enforcement equipment. In a vehicle they knew they were sitting in, where she looked at the camera and said she felt nothing.
Every piece of evidence in this case was created by the people responsible for the plan, not uncovered by brilliant detective work, not extracted through interrogation, created, documented, and carried through the front door of the school. This story was never really about a foiled plan. It was about the red threads, the anonymous tip sent by the one person she trusted the night before, the single conversation that unraveled 4 months of preparation, the unfinished letter sitting in the same bag as the knife, written on the morning she intended to use it, and the patrol car recording where she told anyone who would ever listen exactly what she felt and exactly what she didn't. Most people heard about 2 teenagers arrested at a suburban Florida high school. The details told a different story. A story of months of planning, a belief system built around a tragedy, and a plan that came apart because she talked to the wrong person at the wrong time. That's what we do here. We follow the red threads, one case at a time, one story at a time. If that's something you want to be a part of, subscribe to the Red Threads. The next story is already waiting.